welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Jeff Onan.
And on the recent Character Witness episode we did for Tip Top here on the Kongversation, Dustin and we discussed the massive popularity that the character of Tip Top the Turtle seemingly enjoyed among Rare and Donkey Kong Universe aficionados from around late 1997 to the time of the Rare buyout, September 2002, roughly. And I feel like I need to, put a little asterisk next to that, because while Tip Top was indeed popular, he was popular among a certain select fandom, a group of weirdos, an enclave of deviants. Like this was the Gen 1 Pokemon era, and I'm not saying Tip Top was like on that level. Although his dad is basically a Squirtle, am I right? You know what I'm talking about, Jeff.
You know. Winky face.
Winky face, yeah. But Tip Top, for the Rare fan, I think represented a tabula rasa, a blank slate, where you could project your hopes and dreams for Rare and their budding shared universe onto him. Because Diddy Kong Racing, the game in which Tip Top the Turtle debuted, also debuted the characters of Banjo and Conker. And because of that rollout, because of the way Rare released those games, I think some subconscious part of our brains from the very start, we were looking for the next Diddy Kong Racing character to get their own game. And Tip Top was visually distinct from both Banjo and Conker in that, they're mammals, they're furry. Tip Top is a reptile. He's green, looks different. So it's like, oh yeah, that's a good character to have a game around. It's a little bit different from both Banjo and Conker. That's the way, the child brain works. But the parlor game, which Diddy Kong Racing character would you spin off next? Which Diddy Kong Racing character would you put into a different sort of genre? That kind of became an aspect of our fandom that's near and dear to, I believe, the hearts of everyone who works at DK Vine, both past and present. And it's an area of interest that I think you and I, Jeff, particularly, we share. This idea that you can take a random character from one game and then maybe hang an entirely different game franchise on them with their own unique cast and circumstances and story, and maybe just create an endless network of escalating spin-offs in this shared universe. Although I say this, and I do realize that when we discussed Diddy Kong Racing in the episode where we lamented that Donkey Kong does not get the same kind of fan service as, say, your Crash Bandicoots with your Crash Team Racings and what have you. You said that the cast in Diddy Kong Racing were a cast of nobodies, and that's not how you would do a racing game. And you came up with the facetious character Milky the Moose as an example of this. You don't just start with Milky the Moose.
Yeah, so I put in the notes here to interject about it because you're gonna take things I say and you're gonna just spit them at me. You're gonna throw them in my face. I have to admit, I definitely remember Milky the Moose because we bring him up all the time.
It's a great character.
I don't remember at all saying that Diddy Kong Racing's characters are not how you would build a racing game. Maybe I thought that, but I don't remember it. And this is not the first time this has happened. People will call into the show, this podcast, and they'll reference something I've said. They'll make an in-joke with me. Guys, I don't think about anything that I'm saying. They come out, they're just out into the wind like all these little dandelion drips that are fucking everywhere this season, wherever they are. the pollen in the air. I'm pollinating the world with endless spew of seeds that are my thoughts. And they don't mean anything to me.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah,
Milky the Moose probably is going to get a new game, but the rest I don't know if I agree with.
You're also a blank slate, Jeff, in that you are newly born every single day and you have no memory of what happened before.
Every podcast, my thoughts are whatever the podcast requires.
This is why you're a utility player. This is why we break you out whenever we need that Swiss Army knife.
Sometimes I love something. Sometimes, I think that Tropical Freeze is probably a top 5 DKU game, but other times I'm pretty pissed off at it.
No, you're multifaceted. You're a spectrum, a rainbow of opinions, and that's why I value you. But no, talking about Tipped Up with Dustin, it did make me reflective of this era of my fandom, of our fandom, an era long gone, let's be honest. But this notion that could Tipped Up get his own N64 game at the time, it went beyond Tipped Up. We speculated on potentially every single Diddy Kong Racing character getting their own game at some point. I don't think we left any stone left unturned. We were just giddy, like Diddy, at the prospect of a Diddy Kong Racing character like Banjo, like Conker, getting some sort of own adventure with their own supporting cast. And then maybe you could spin off something from that and then spin off something from that. I don't know where in our minds we thought Rare could continually keep this escalation game going, because it's not feasible, especially with where the industry was headed. But when you're a kid, it's a romantic notion when you're a hardcore fan of something. And I think the general public finally caught on to that when the MCU was really hot in the 2010s. But I got nostalgic for this. And Jeff, you came to me separately and you said we should do an episode about Diddy Kong Racing spinoffs we wanted but never got. And I was like, well, hot damn, I was just thinking that myself. So on this episode of The Kongversation, we are going to discuss just that. Especially because none of these games have any chance of being made today. It's not in the cards anymore. This, like I said, this is an era long gone. The moment has passed. But that doesn't mean we can't harken back to this time. Pretend. Imagine. We're talking about the Diddy Kong Racing spinoffs we wanted, but never got. Are you ready, Jeff? Are you ready for this?
I'm ready for it. But before we get right into it,
yes,
we have just a little bit of homework.
We do. Because I gotta remind everyone, all right? Stinky Ape Summer. It's kicking off. It's kicking off the weekend of June 9th. Actually, Friday, June 7th will be the official launch of DK Vine's Stinky Ape Summer 2024. I know you're excited, Jeff. My nipples are pert. And this is this year going to replace E3 coverage, or not E3 coverage. E3 is dead. We're going to let it decompose. And Stinky Ape Summer will just be our catch-all branding for the summer game announcement season. And, I have no idea what's in the cards for Nintendo. I'm not going to put myself out there for Nintendo, but I think we're about to head into some news from other corners of what DK Vine covers. So I'm ready for
Bleeding Edge 2.
Bleeding Edge 2, I know. I'm edging to it from now until the weekend of June 9th. But this is the last regular episode of The Kongversation before Stinky Ape Summer kicks off. It'll kick off June 7th with a live episode at twitch.tv/DKVine. We're going to do a live episode about the Xbox Showcase. We're going to, tisk Xbox as a brand right now, but hopefully we'll have some interesting things to discuss from our neck of the woods. And yeah, we're just going to go from there. Nintendo's going to be having a direct this month, and we'll do a live episode for that when it happens. And I've got some surprises lined up. Got some episodes all summer long. Starts June 7th. Don't miss it. Also, it is June, so happy Pride Month if you celebrate, if you are an ally. We do have our best-selling Play It Proud shirt on our merchandise store at dkvine.com/merchandise. All of DK Vine's proceeds from this will go to the Trevor Project, as it has since last year. It's year round. We don't pull it. It's not on sale only for the month of June, but it's a very clever shirt. Jeff, it's your idea. You came up with it.
I did, yeah. It's a lot better selling than the one about grapes.
It is, and it's probably more meaningful. It's probably serves a greater cause than a grapes shirt.
Well, the grapes shirt, some of the proceeds go to me, the Jeff Project.
That's right.
And I could funnel that money right back into buying more shirts. So
yeah, like the Dino Domain shirt that we have on our merchandise store. Jeff, you also came up with that. It's just a Jurassic Park parody, but
I'm just a good shirt thinker.
You are.
I think them up. I think them up all the time. Jot them down.
Yeah, and then you don't remember what you thought up because you just start afresh every day.
Yeah, I think that the Dino Domain is a bad idea for a shirt. I don't, but I guess it's too late.
And also, we are on Patreon. Be sure you go to dkevin.com/Patreon if you enjoy the work we do. We do live stream these episodes for our $5 and up patrons. And I want to say hello right now to the Geek Critique. Josh Wallen is there. We got Luffy Dawn there. We have March Rose. Hello, everyone. We will check in with the live stream as we go, as we're wont to do. Jeff, I wanted to put this on your radar because you forgot, or you nearly forgot last couple times. Your whole thing this season is suggesting a tagline for the Kongversation every episode you're on.
That's right. And I do improvise them. I don't know. I know they're very good, so people probably think I plan ahead. No, I'm just a good improviser. So now I'm gonna say what I think this could be the next DK Vine Kongversation podcast tagline or catchphrase or slogan. Okay. DK Vine's The Kongversation. It won't give you food poisoning.
It's true. It's true. I hate food. I try to avoid
Hyle
it when I
hates
can.
food. Yeah, that's true. I feel like you're always coming up with a new little Hyle quirk. The food one is not new. We were well aware of it. But I'm like, I was thinking the other day, what would be a Hyle quirk that he might just drop on us one day? Like Hyle will say, I hate sitting on the toilet seat. When I poop, I hover above it so I don't have to sit on the toilet seat. That sounds like something Hyle would say.
I hate pooping in general. It's filthy business, and it's karma for the food you ate. Yeah, so...
Yeah, no, if you want to live in this world, there's a fee you have to pay. All right?
This is the toll.
That should be his tagline. Yeah. DK Vine's The Kongversation. If you want to live in this world, there's a fee you have to pay.
Anyway, Jeff,
we should probably talk about the episode, the thing that it's about.
Yeah. So, Diddy Kong Racing. Now, let's, I think, set the tone. Let's frame this for those who may not be familiar, because I see a lot of misinformation about Diddy Kong Racing in modern day discourse, because Diddy Kong Racing, we've talked about this for several years now on the Kongversation, how it's kind of fallen down the memory hole a little bit because it has not been commercially available in over 2 decades. So because of that, people who weren't necessarily concurrent with its release or aren't up on the history, they have a lot of assumptions that they're making about the game and the nature of how the characters within were presented. And it's important to stress, because the whole conceit of this episode relies on it. Diddy Kong Racing framed Banjo-Kazooie and Conker as part of Donkey Kong's world, and in effect made them backdoor spin-offs of Diddy Kong Racing. Jeff, you know the term in TV, generally sitcoms, but there's a term called backdoor pilot.
Yes, I'm well aware. I would suggest a lot of lube, a lot of keep it clean, wash up first and after. Don't go back and forth between both doors. Once you go in the back door, you don't go back to the front door. You're going to get an infection that way.
This is all great health advice, and I don't want to shut it down. But what I'm actually referring to is when a TV show is in development, and generally this happens when it has either the same producers or the same production house as another more successful long-running TV show. Somebody gets the idea that, hey, people might not watch our show, but what if we introduce the characters in an episode of the existing show, and in effect make it a spin-off, even though it wasn't conceived as a spin-off. We are going to make it this branch off this pre-existing successful show. The show Married with Children did this quite a bit, usually to no great success. Happy Days had some legitimate spin-offs, but also did the backdoor spin-off route from time to time. But it's kind of an underhanded, sneaky way of trying to make people care about a new property by making it connected to something they already like. Now, this is what happened with Banjo-Kazooie and Conker with Diddy Kong Racing. Obviously, Banjo-Kazooie and Conker were supposed to come out before Diddy Kong Racing. And then Diddy Kong Racing was closer to completion when Banjo-Kazooie got delayed and Conker itself got delayed then. And so it just made sense then to use Diddy Kong Racing to introduce the characters. And they were given introductory biographies in Diddy Kong Racing's instruction manual and promotional materials. Banjo and Conker were both centered as acquaintances of Diddy Kong that he met on unseen adventures with Donkey Kong, and it kind of firmly rooted them in the world of Donkey Kong Country and this burgeoning notion of a rare archipelago. And I know our faithful listeners know this, but this fact is absolutely lost on some younger generations who, again, aren't up on their history. Because I'm not saying every person who is younger than like anybody who would have been around at the time Diddy Kong Racing came out wouldn't know this. There are people who study history in anything they like, read up on it, and get a good idea. But other people, they don't necessarily do their homework. And so they just make wide assumptions based on what they think feels right about the history. And so this is something I kind of brush up against quite a bit in the last few years, in fact, where and Diddy Kong Racing DS didn't help. Diddy Kong Racing DS kind of sort of fed this narrative that Diddy Kong Racing just had Banjo and Conker as guest characters. Like a lot of racing games today or other games will just have guest characters from another series. Like fighting games will do this quite a bit.
We're going to throw Jason Voorhees into Mortal Kombat, but nobody's trying to imply that the Mortal Kombat franchise is deeply part of the Friday the 13th universe.
Right. And so they see Banjo and Conker in a game called Diddy Kong Racing, and they think, oh, okay, they were guest characters because Rare made it. And that's not the case. That isn't, in fact, any part of Diddy Kong Racing's narrative. The fact that Diddy Kong Racing has a story and is like an adventure game on top of a racing game, that's also kind of lost on younger generations, I think, who have never played it. And they just think, oh, Diddy Kong Racing was Rare's Mario Kart, and it was just racing, and it starred Diddy Kong. And that's wrong, because Banjo and Conker are both part of the narrative of the game. I mean, let me just read you really quick the little paragraph from the story of Diddy Kong Racing, because it says, finally, he being Diddy, decided that his friends Banjo and Conker would still enjoy an adventure, even if it turned out their services weren't needed. So the young ape dug out a pencil stub from the mess of his bedroom and hopped back into his seat. Whistling for Squawks, his own makeshift carrier pigeon, he began to scribble out a couple of messages of his own. And then in Banjo's biography, it mentions, so when Squawks brings the message from his pal Diddy Kong, the honey bear stuffs a few things into his trusty backpack and takes to his heels. And then in Conker's biography, it said that Conker is another friend made by Diddy Kong on one of his endless adventures with Donkey Kong. And it says that he's eager to join up with Banjo as the bear passes through. So they're not guest characters. They're just part of the cast. And even though Banjo-Kazooie and Conker weren't intended at their individual conceptions to be Donkey Kong spin-offs, this meant that they were introduced as such. And this is something that was honored in various ways in both Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Pocket Tales. And honestly, every single Banjo-Kazooie game after, or just about nearly every Banjo-Kazooie game after, had some sort of reference to either Diddy Kong Racing or this greater shared universe. So it's not something that, like, there's this narrative now that, like, oh, well, Greg Mayles never intended that. So Greg Mayles says that they're not part of the same shared universe, and this isn't canon. It's just like, okay, but no, like, in 1997, this is how we viewed it. This is how Rare promoted it. And I don't know. I feel like the generation of Rare fans who were contemporary with the release of Diddy Kong Racing will never be swayed on this, because we live the history, and you can make up your own bullshit narratives, but this is the way it was, and this is the way it still is, because you can't just rewrite history.
Yeah, no, I have nothing to add. That's just true, but
yeah.
You're not going to really sway young people either. Not that young people are the problem or anything. This is, people are rewriting. Every age group is rewriting history in different ways.
Yeah.
But, people have their own idea of how things are. And, for the people who were actually part of it, like you and my parents' generation, they filled me in. Because my first DKU game was the DS one. But I couldn't even figure out the buttons. I was too young. So, yeah. When I think of Diddy Kong Racing, I think of like a really tall, tiny Kong. Just like, I'm like, why does she call it Tiny Kong? She's so tall. This is crazy. I didn't know how to read, so my dad told me what she was called.
Jeff, I don't know what's real and what's not with you anymore. I was like, this doesn't line up with what I know about your backstory.
No, my backstory is fluid. Have you heard of the what is that called? The what's that called? Where the universe has changed and the Bernstein Bears are different?
Mandela effect.
Yeah. In my universe, it's called a Mandela effect. But but then everyone started saying Mandela effect. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? It was always Mandela effect.
Jeff, you're a cornucopia of shit.
Like the underwear.
Like the
There's
underwear.
A reference.
Yeah.
Okay.
in the live stream, the Geek Critique says, the thing that drives me crazy about the whole this isn't canon argument is that people treat it like it's real. Like, who gives a shit if the canon's been changed since? It's all just as fictional as it was before. And yeah,
this
like,
kind of brings back one of my common mantras on the website is that when we get a little too heated about whether or not Diddy Kong is Donkey Kong's nephew, I like to remind people that Diddy Kong is not real.
Right. And this is one of my bugaboos, that people are too wiki-brained these days. Like they're very much, they take no agency in their own fandom, and they're very much told what to think. And it's just like, no, just study the world and see what unspools before you. And you might find surprises and delights that you'll never find on the various wiki pages for what you like. And also, media literacy is dead. Just like, people just can't absorb something and draw their own conclusions or interpretations. It's very much, okay, but what did the creator intend at this very specific moment in time? So anyway, I say all that, but something else not really taken into account is Diddy Kong Racing is a game with absurdly convoluted legal issues, because it's not a Nintendo game. Although Nintendo does own the name Diddy Kong Racing, Diddy Kong is effectively a guest character in his own game, because it is centered on him and his perspective, but the game itself is a Rare game. It was published by Rare. Diddy Kong Racing is a trademark of Nintendo, and at the time of release, Diddy Kong, Banjo, and Crunch were licensed by Nintendo to Rare.
Yeah, this is different than when Rare made Donkey Kong games like Donkey Kong Country, and they were developing those games for Nintendo.
Yeah.
And Nintendo was publishing them. It was a fully Nintendo-owned property. Diddy Kong Racing is a Rare game, published by Rare, that they licensed some of Nintendo's characters to put in there.
Yes.
So Rare owns the game, but Nintendo owns the title of it and the guest characters. So what it all boils down to, effectively, is that neither side really wants to touch it because it's too complicated. Who owns what? I mean, they know who owns what, but it's a hassle because the rights are kind of all over the place. I think it's sort of like how they can't make a Planet Hulk movie, so they had to put the Hulk in Thor Ragnarok or whatever. I don't know. Right. I'm so sick of these Marvel things being what we have to relate everything to. Like, guys, read a book, but
yeah, read a book, like, Marvel graphic novels. Come on.
God.
Yeah, so obviously at the time, Nintendo had a stake in Banjo-Kazooie. That's why, like, Nintendo had the trademark on Banjo. After the buyout, Banjo obviously went with Rare, and Diddy and Crunch stayed with Nintendo. But then there was the issue of Tricky, the boss character of Dino Domain, and we'll be getting into Tricky quite a bit on this episode. But because of Star Fox Adventures, that interpretation of Tricky definitely belongs to Nintendo, and Rare probably wouldn't poke the bear, or Earthwalker in this case, by using the Diddy Kong Racing iteration of Tricky anywhere except where appropriate, like Diddy Kong Racing DS. But speaking of Diddy Kong Racing DS, I want to point out this is a great source of confusion for a lot of people, because a lot of younger fans that, like, you just tried to make yourself as one, Jeff. You said the Diddy Kong Racing DS was your first Donkey Kong Universe game, and I don't think that's true, but it was kind of reversed, because it was a game published by Nintendo, and what happened was Rare then licensed everything else to Nintendo. Kind of a bizarro switcheroo, because the actual copyright blurb on it says 2007 Nintendo, game by Rare, certain characters licensed by Rare. So it's just interesting. This kind of stuff is fascinating to me. I love wallowing in it, even though it's well-worn territory for DK Vine. It's something I will never get tired of. Just like, oh yeah, did you know Diddy Kong Racing is not a Nintendo game? And you can always just kind of blow somebody's hair back when you bring that up.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this whole idea was we got a few different spin-offs. Spin-offs did happen, and then that kind of inspired our imaginations to imagine what more spin-offs could there be. So let's talk about the spin-offs that there was that sparked the whole idea, that turned Diddy Kong Racing into a focal point, a nexus of where the future spin-offs are all going to come from.
Yes. So keep in mind that when we mention Diddy Kong Racing spin-offs, this is kind of different from Diddy Kong Racing sequels, as in actual direct follow-ups to Diddy Kong Racing. We did get Diddy Kong Racing DS in 2007, but have things panned out differently in the past. At various points, we had Diddy Kong Racing for the Game Boy Color in development. We had Diddy Kong Pilot for the Game Boy Advance, and we had Donkey Kong Racing for the GameCube. And of course, Diddy Kong Racing for the Game Boy Color plausibly became Mickey's Racing Adventure. Then Banjo Pilot was what became of Diddy Kong Pilot. And then Donkey Kong Racing went through this very complicated evolution. It eventually became Saberman Stampede before ultimately being scrapped altogether. So that's a Diddy Kong Racing sequel. But the direct spin-offs we did get, of course, Banjo-Kazooie and the Banjo-Kazooie series. And from there, Tip Top did become a minor supporting character in the Banjo-Kazooie series. And he appeared in Kazooie, Tooie, Banjo Pilot in a little cameo. And his daddy, Sex Juice, was in Grunty's Revenge. And that's right, I mentioned the cummies, Jeff. Go ahead and take a drink. Take a shot. And if it's spooge, then all the better.
Yeah, that's right. We're talking about probably the most family-friendly video game ever made, Diddy Kong Racing. And Hyle said to drink spooge. So,
yeah,
you know.
And you just opened your can of it, I heard.
I did, yeah. It's a Diet Dr. Spooge.
Well,
you know, the fake sugar kind of leaves an aftertaste, but, you know, I'm not trying to gain weight here.
It's all those people who think traits could be passed through genetics, and so they go to the sperm bank and like, give me a doctor.
yeah. If I put this in here, I'm gonna learn about what is a tracheotomy. I'm still waiting to find out, but it's gonna come to me one day.
Tracheotomy would be a great Diddy Kong Racing spinoff, Jeff.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, he's a doctor. So Banjo-Kazooie, of course, the big one, the most successful one, although, again, Backdoor spinoff. Conker's Pocket Tales and the Conker series is the other one. And while no Diddy Kong Racing characters other than Conker have appeared anywhere in the Conker series, Conker was the character who did give us the lore that a Diddy Kong Racing character went to prison. And this is one of the most endearing legacies of the Diddy Kong Racing cast at this point. Jeff, I gave you the little excerpt from this kind of mock press release.
You did, yes. And yes. You called it an excerpt. So I'm going to read the excerpt.
Yes, excerpt.
Your Pennsylvanian is coming through.
Oh yeah. It's I can't wean it out of me. It's Pennsylvania Dutch is just so ingrained. But go ahead and read this quote from Conker from the time of Conker Live and Reloaded.
Yeah, and I'm not going to do a voice.
No, please don't.
We don't do voices on the Kongversation podcast. Here's Conker. He says, "Let's see then. Might as well get it over with. A little bit of history first. As many of you may not know, because half of you probably weren't even born till the mid-1990s, plus it's something I don't really talk about these days, yours truly made his first appearance in Diddy Kong Racing on the N64 way back in 1997. Things were different back then, you know? I was different. It goes without saying, you wouldn't catch me hanging out with any of those freaks these days. Last I heard, at least one of them was in jail anyway.
Yeah, and this kind of became ongoing lore on Rare's website. And then it was finally confirmed by Lee Loveday in 2012 that the character who went to jail was Bumper. And Bumper eventually shook out that it was indecent exposure. And mostly based on his character select screen animation where he looks like he's spanking himself. So you called Diddy Kong Racing a family-friendly game, but look what it has wrought, Jeff.
Yeah, Conker killed a baby dinosaur. Bumper, something to do with showing off his genitals or something. You know, these are bad things. These are wrong things to do. Diddy Kong vapes.
Yeah.
Which is, like, there's nothing wrong with vaping, but when you're like an icon to children, maybe don't vape publicly.
Do you think Lanky Kong has like the grape ape vape?
No, I do think he does heroin. That guy he's in a daze right now.
It turns out whenever he like inflates like a balloon and floats in the air, that's just what he's feeling when he's high as a kite.
He's constantly chasing that first high. Everyone is just a little bit not as good.
So
yeah, we gotta rewrite the rap now.
You can only do purple heroin though, so it really makes it difficult to get that fixed. So yeah, like Conker has kind of been more removed from the general like roots of Diddy Kong Racing compared to Banjo-Kazooie, but even Conker has gotten in on the act and dragged Bumper down into the muck with him. And then that brings us to Dinosaur Planet, Star Fox Adventures, and Tricky. Now, talk about convoluted. This is even more convoluted than Donkey Kong Racing becoming Saberman Stampede. Yeah. Because this is where Dino Domain boss Tricky the Triceratops was originally going to be featured in a separate game called Dino Island. More on that later. And that evolved into a completely different sci-fi fantasy game called Dinosaur Planet, which ultimately became a Star Fox 64 sequel made by Rare, with Dinosaur Planet's lore sort of just grafted onto it. And despite all that, despite all of the changes, cast rotations and evolutions that went through, somehow Tricky remained a character to the very end. And, there's been a lot of debate in the fandom. Is that the same Tricky? And my whole contention has been, why would the character's name be Tricky? Because that's a garbage name for what the character actually is. There's nothing tricky about that character in Star Fox Adventures. And Rare was cagey on this, on whether or not they were the same character. Up until the early 2010s, around the time Lee Loveday said Bumper was the one who went to prison, I think they just stopped caring and they said, yeah, sure, it's the same Tricky. So, another Diddy Kong Racing spinoff.
They kind of no longer had a reason to hide it in any way because it wasn't like important anymore. The game is old. They're never going to follow up with that character. So it's like, yeah, at this point, we have no reason not to be kind of honest or just decide, how we want to interpret it. The other tricky part, okay, that was a pun. Didn't mean to. The other, I need a thesaurus. I'm blanking here. The other difficult.
Were there thesauruses on Dinosaur Planet?
Oh, that's a high level one.
Wordplay.
We're usually a 2 out of 5 with ours, but you just dropped a 4. All right, that'll reflect on your end of year review.
Is Mitchell giving me that one again? Oh God.
Yeah, that was the annual tradition, right? But and then with Electronic Arts got in the game because of course, they licensed him for the game SSX Tricky. So, having him in there really makes his character difficult, like complicated, convoluted.
Tricky did show up in Star Fox Assault, so we know, like...
Oh, yeah.
We got a little bit of a follow-up on him, but what I love about Tricky being in Star Fox Adventures as a little boy is that it effectively made Star Fox a Donkey Kong prequel. I just love the sheer chaos that represents. It just like, Star Fox, that's just backstory to Donkey Kong, and like talking about blowing people's hair back.
It's fascinating because it retroactively means that all of the dinosaurs on Timber's Island are aliens. So
yeah,
that's fun.
Not just on Timber's Island, but potentially on the Isle of Hags, in the Panther Kingdom, all those dinosaurs we saw in the Rare era. They're extraterrestrials.
Kind of hot.
Yeah, I will do a DKU lore tour about it at some point. But the only other...
That should be an episode of the podcast. Dinosaurs in the DKU. That's a whole episode.
We'll do...
Let us know in the chat.
We'll do a 1-2 punch. We'll do the dinosaur episode of the podcast. I'll do a DKU lore tour video. It'll be when the new Jurassic Park movie comes out. It'll be how we tie
we'll do it next year for the 25th anniversary of dinosaurs.
So the only other kind of thread that carried over from Diddy Kong Racing is that although the character himself did not make another appearance outside of Diddy Kong Racing DS, Critters, the kind of stock Kremlin grunt in the Kremlin crew army, they did take on Crunch's, I call it the leather daddy look, where it's just kind of the biker vest that's, it just the sleeveless leather jacket with a skull on the back. But they took on this look from 1999 to 2004, even extended past the Rare era into the buyout era. There were Critters wearing these vests in Mario Power Tennis, of all things. But that was a brief little ripple in the pond from Crunch and Diddy Kong Racing. So kind of neat. But again, the character of Crunch only appeared in 2007's Diddy Kong Racing DS. So those are the spin-offs we got. Let's talk about the spin-offs we almost got, because even though we, the fans, were playing this parlor game where we were trying to imagine what other characters might get their own game, Rare was also in this headspace. They were also thinking, hey, you know what? Maybe there's gold in them thar hills. The hills being the one with Wizpig's face on it. So I mentioned Dinosaur Planet started life as a game called Dino Island and eventually Dinosaur Island. And this was going to feature Tricky, but the lead character who is going to be partnered with him, much like Fox McCloud and before him Saber were partnered with him, was in fact going to be Timber the Tiger. So we talked about this a little bit last year on the Kongversation when we kind of got confirmation on Dino Island. But Kev Bayless spoke to this a little bit before that. Kev Bayless mentioned when the Dinosaur Planet ROM leaked that, and I'm going to quote him here, after finishing work on Diddy Kong Racing in 1998, I started work on a project that was to become a 3D adventure game based in a fantasy-style world, similar to that of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, but in a prehistoric environment. The main character was originally going to be, believe it or not, Timber, the cute tiger from Diddy Kong Racing. That's because he was intended to be the star of the previous year's racing game, when it was originally known as RC Pro-Am 64. However, due to a last-minute rebrand, which saw Diddy take pole position as the main character, Timber had to accept second place and never really made the leading role. I wasn't too disappointed about this, to be honest, because luckily Diddy was also my character design too. A little humble brag from Kev Bayless there. You see what he did? He was like, oh, I just have so many good characters. They just spill out of my brain.
That's like when the Beatles record streak for #1 albums got broken because they couldn't hit #1 because they were competing with themselves. They were still at #1. Yeah.
In fact, I was quite excited to have a game coming out which was pretty much named after him as the main man. In Dinosaur Planet, and he's actually referring to Dino Island here, Timber was going to be a time-traveling tiger with a rucksack, little fingerless gloves, a baseball cap, and a small dinosaur for a sidekick. And this was in an interview, or I guess write-up Kev Bayless did with Video Games Chronicle, VGC, which is Andy Robinson's website. So take a drink. Yeah, take a drink of whatever you have. Dr. Cum, I don't know. So Dino Island would have been interesting, Jeff, because I think it would have rooted Dinosaur Planet's mythology a lot closer to home. And we talked about the dinosaurs in Diddy Kong Racing being extraterrestrials. My impression is this might have retconned it more as a time travel thing where they were brought forward from the prehistoric era.
Certainly more grounded. The backstory of Dinosaur Planet, to me, is such an odd little bit of world building because it's ostensibly science fiction at its core because we're talking about space planets. Like there's a planet with stuff and then they travel to the other planet. This is before the Star Fox IP was attached to it. But like the backstory of the planet of Dinosaur Planet, it seems sci-fi, but the actual like stuff in the plot is very like magical fantasy with like a sorcerer and stuff. And it's an odd mishmash. So if you had just made it Dinosaur Island and not made it about like interplanetary travel, it probably would have just been more cohesive. But then that you also have the fact that Dino Island is a perfect pitch for a new dating show. I would audition. I'd want to be on Dino Island.
All of these reality shows now are like you're doing an island version of it, right? Like put everything on this island. Like that somehow makes it more dangerous or sexy.
They have this one. It's called Deal or No Deal Island, and I was like, come on, guys, what are we? You know, I'm waiting for Tic Tac Toe Island as the ultimate like conclusion. But I would, I want to date a dinosaur, some sort of. The ultimate Dami Mommy, right?
Oh God.
A 1,000-ton Stegosaurus.
Domosaurus, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you can see, though, the evolution of how, like, Dino Island eventually became Star Fox Adventures, and it's just wild to me that poor Timber got the axe yet again from being the lead character, and this time, usurped by another Nintendo character, Fox McCloud, but somehow Tricky persevered and just, like, lasted to the very end.
Well, there's that spot in the middle where Timber was replaced already with Saber.
Yes.
So even Rare wasn't, like, confident in Timber leading their Ocarina of Time fantasy game, but, poor kid.
I do wonder.
He just lacks discipline.
I do wonder if Dino Island would have been a Diddy Kong Racing prequel, kind of like laying out some of the backstory there of how dinosaurs came to be on the island, and especially
like how they invented cars.
Right. It's like, oh wait, we can use your decomposed fluids to be the oil in the cars.
Oh,
this works out great.
Fascinating thought. A racing game about dinosaurs. They're burning themselves. Fossil fuel. That's, There's a little something in there. Philosophy. I might have to write an essay.
Fossil fuels would be a great name for a dinosaur racing game.
That's it. All right. We're done with podcasting. We're going to make games now.
So another Diddy Kong Racing spin-off, and this actually was not conceived until like smack dab in the middle of the buyout era when Rare was with Microsoft. This was the first game to use the name The Fast and the Furriest, because this would be taken out of the mothballs in another attempt a couple years after this, but that would be more of a general like Rare IP racing game, not in the Diddy Kong Racing sense, but more taking the established stars of Rare games and putting them all together, kind of a more conventional sort of mascot kart racer than Diddy Kong Racing was. What people think Diddy Kong Racing was, when in fact was not. But The Fast and the Furious, the original version of it, was utilizing the Xbox 360, it's like camera that, it was like very rudimentary version of what would become the Kinect, sort of.
Yes. And people might not remember, but back in the day, this was like a booming new concept. They had a lot of them on the PlayStation consoles with what was called the iToy. iToy was one, and then Xbox got their own camera, which it was called the Vision camera, and that was utilized in Rare games. Specifically, Viva Pinata Trouble in Paradise utilized the camera to scan in collectible cards to unlock something. I don't know. It didn't matter. But I don't think it was really utilized in minigame play, but these cameras were a lot more rudimentary in what they could track compared to the Kinect, which was a much more advanced motion control system. But these cameras were like, hey, we'll make a minigame where you can wave or whatever.
Yeah. Which is probably why this game never really got off the ground, given how, I guess, dodgy the technology was. It was kind of Kinect Sports before Kinect Sports was even on the table. But what's very interesting about it was that it would really celebrate the Rare shared universe, the Rare side of the Donkey Kong universe, where it would bring together Banjo-Kazooie, Conker, and Diddy Kong Racing elements all in the same game. And a lot of this from what we've seen, and this is mostly just from a presentation that Rare's Nick Burton gave, and we saw like clips or screenshots from it, but you could like put your head in these mascot costumes that would, as we saw from one screenshot, like it's a track and field thing where Conker, Banjo, and TT are all racing each other. And judging from the way TT looks, this would have been around the time Diddy Kong Racing DS was in development. But we also had like a bunch of Tip-Tups racing each other, like just people in Tip-Tup costumes. But the real Tip-Tup actually did show up, and I mentioned this on the episode I did with Dustin recently, in this kind of cross between bowling and curling, where you like throw Tip-Tup like on a shell, like laying on a shell across the ice and knock over a bunch of penguins who are kind of shaped like bowling pins. So this really is intriguing to me as somebody who loves Rare Shared Universe, but is glum that it's never celebrated even by Rare to the extent that you think it would be. And they were really like going all in on it here with The Fast and the Furriest, but it was not meant to be.
Yeah, it's fascinating because of, I mean, the element that it's based around like the mascot character costumes, and that you the human being are the playable character, but you're wearing a TT costume. Mm-hmm. That's a weird direction, but I think in a big, like full budget real game that could be like really funny and interesting. And I think they ended up taking this idea and running with it when they made Kinect Sports, because one of the big things in Kinect Sports is, I think, some of these weird little mascot costumes, like the Carrot Man or whatever. Or was that really a Carrot Man? I can't remember. Was it a guy in a carrot costume?
It was just a carrot costume.
I never played much Kinect. Yeah, it was a costume. Yeah, so the idea of big mascot costumes, they did kind of take that idea and continue it. But they didn't end up bringing forward the idea of some of those costumes could just be, I don't know, Bumper the Badger.
Right. Which basically get you arrested sight unseen.
Right. They wanted to promote a healthy lifestyle, like eating carrots. So they didn't want to promote ass play, which there's nothing wrong with.
So the only other thing to bring up as far as Diddy Kong Racing spin-offs that never got off the ground, and I'm sorry, Jeff, I have to bring it up because it's part of the history. TT the Stopwatch did appear in the Unity build of Sea of Thieves. So this is kind of the workshop build that Rare made to test out ideas in Sea of Thieves before implementing them in the final actual build of the game, which is Unreal and the Unreal Engine. So the Unity build is very janky looking. It's the one with like pill people instead of actual like pirate figures. But I got to play it when I went to Rare in 2016, and I saw TT with my own eyes. Luckily, Greg Mails eventually released a screenshot of this so I could talk about it finally. And of course, never shut up about it after the fact. Thank you, Greg Mails. But yeah, TT basically operated like we now know ship trinkets to be. You could pick up TT, you could hang him on the wall. He would actually be synced with the in-game time. And yeah, still want him in the actual game as a ship trinket. And of course, it's something I always go on and on and on and on and on about, but I only do it because it existed. This isn't something I would have, a la ass play, pulled out of my hindquarters had I never seen it first. Like, this is not an idea I would have come up with on my own. Hey, you know what would be great in this pirate game that you're making, Rare? TT the Stopwatch. Put him in there, please. The only reason I won't shut up about it is because it did exist. It does exist. And it's glorious. Once you're touched by TT and Sea of Thieves, you'll never be the same again.
Yeah, and it would be funny.
It would be funny. And honestly, I would just like to have him in my ship, because that would make my ship feel like a home. So,
yeah, I mean, I want a lot of little things like, why, one of the main items you use is a bucket. So why don't we have Leaky the Bucket from Banjo-Kazooie? Right. He should be a bucket. Or like one of the core items you use all the time is a shovel. Why don't we have the Viva Pinata shovel in there? It's that Rare has made 2 games about using a shovel, and they're not cross-pollinating their shovelry. So, yeah.
I think they hate money, because we've talked about this. We've talked about how much I would pay for the privilege of having TT as a ship trinket.
I'll remind them in case they didn't get my advice last time. But if they put TT in there in the shop and they charge $3,000 for him in microtransaction real life dollars, they will get one sale, and it will be Hyle. And then I have to imagine that is worth it. That's just $3,000. That's just some profit. It costs some money to make it, but then now you have $3,000, and then you can like take it to the bank and you do your groceries and stuff. Why don't they want money?
Yeah, TT is what, like 3 primary colors? Like, just how much effort would that make?
If they made him one color, like, what if they don't even color him? He's just like a model with no coloring in.
Oh, it's like in those Star Wars prequels before like C-3PO got his platings. He's just like, he's the wrong color. It's just like, oh yeah, it's TT, but it's after he was just built. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, we go back in time and we find out that it was the Pirate Lord that built TT in the first place before his heel turn. We haven't gotten there yet, but the Pirate Lord is actually Grunty the Witch.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spoil the story for anybody, but it's clear that's where it's headed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is the basically complete history. And, it's possible behind the scenes at Rare they had other ideas they were kicking around for the cast after Diddy Kong Racing that just never got off the ground. Like, we just found out about Diddy Kong Racing for the Game Boy Color last year, and that's because Ed Bryan just like shared a document on social media, not realizing that it contained this like amazing bit of history that nobody outside of Rare knew about. And so we're always learning new stuff about this time. Very fruitful, productive time at Rare. So it's very possible there were other spin-offs being bandied about that we still don't know about today. But at this point in time, this time of recording, this is all we know. So that brings us to the actual like title of this episode, the Diddy Kong Racing spin-offs we wanted but never got.
And we didn't do a bad job. 1 hour before we got to the subject is not bad.
Well, here's the thing though, Jeff. All those ideas I just talked about, TT and Sea of Thieves, The Fast and the Furious, Dino Islands, those are all games I still want. Like, or things I still want. Those are all part of my list of Diddy Kong Racing spin-offs we wanted but never got. We haven't gotten them, and I still want them. Like Dino Island, okay, maybe not, because we kind of got a version of that. But The Fast and the Furious, yeah, I would play that game. TT and Sea of Thieves, we already mentioned that I would bankrupt myself to make that happen. So I feel like it's still been on point up until now.
All right. Well, let's get into some more speculative stuff that was never officially being worked on by Rare, but stuff that fans had come up with, that we had come up with or dreamed about in terms of Diddy Kong Racings that could have been, Diddy Kong Racing spin-offs that could have been.
Yes.
And go back to that very first character you brought up.
Yeah, we have to do it because Tip Top kind of became the stock meme character for Rare fandom during the height of what we call the spin-off era. This very fruitful time at Rare from like roughly 1997 to 2002, where they were just like coming out with like blockbuster franchise after blockbuster franchise, and a lot of them were related to Diddy Kong Racing or the broader Donkey Kong universe. And so Tip Top was the character, like I said, everybody kind of projected this notion on. And I don't know exactly why, considering Tip Top was already in Banjo-Kazooie. Maybe that's what put it over the edge for people. It's like, well, Tip Top got to be a minor character in Banjo-Kazooie, so now maybe we can just boost him, bump him up to starring lead.
Well, and not bump him up. We'll tip him up. We won't be
tip
bumping
him up, right?
That comes later.
That comes later with the Badger game. But I don't know. Like, at this point in time, I look back and I'm like, well, no, Tip Top being a supporting character in Banjo-Kazooie, that's good enough. I think as a greedy little youth, I absolutely did want a Tip Top game. Tip Top 64, like whatever. Like, I don't know what you would do with it, because how could you do another 3D platformer when even Donkey Kong 64 was struggling with the direction by the time we got around to it? Like, Conker had to go completely in this wild direction where it just was just this vulgar cartoon. This basically like 3D platformer meets Tex Avery animation, like almost like interactive feature length movie. So yeah, I don't know what you would exactly do with Tip Top. I did bring in the opinions of some DK Vine staff because I wanted to kind of get a clear picture on what we could all contribute. Like, not just you and me, Jeff, but everyone. Like, what were some of the Diddy Kong Racing spinoffs that the whole team wanted? And most of them took it seriously. Andrew of the Idaho crew said Tip Top Babysitting Simulator. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And so to elaborate, they said it's like Shrek, Ogres, and Dronkies, but with Tip Top's many children. And I have no idea what that means or is trying
Shrek
to...
Shrek is a character, basically. Green. Sort of a cartoon. I'm not going to explain to you what Dronkies are. That's more important to me that you don't get to know. You just have to...
Was that a typo? Did he mean donkeys?
No. It's not a typo. The title of this is Shrek, Ogres, and Dronkies. I don't know what this game is. I've never heard of this. I've never played this. But what I will say is, Geek Critique in their chat, Josh said, I'm surprised Jeff is old enough to remember Shrek. Well, Shrek is my dad, so kind of remember my own dad. So, you know.
Yeah. You are half mountain troll, and I've always respected that part of your
Shrek,
heritage, Jeff.
The mountain troll. Yes, I am. I have the spikes. I have the spurs, the venomous spurs, as they all have. It's just like a Disney Channel movie where when I turned 13, I realized I was turning into a mountain troll. But no, I don't know what this game is. I'm imagining it's like, and maybe I'm way off base. I'm picturing like a Pikmin-like game where you walk around like you have a whole horde of little minions like the Pikmin are in the game Pikmin, and you can like throw them around and like use them for tasks. I could see that with Tip Top with his children. And the thing about it is it's very realistic to nature because, some of them will die. But that's like in nature, you're like, well, I'm a turtle. I'm going to have as many kids as I can because most of them are going to die. Like the turtle eggs hatch and they make that little swim to the ocean. Yeah. To try and get away. And most of them die. This is what people don't want to talk about. We're not ready for that conversation, I think. But Tip Top would have hundreds of babies, and then he would use them to like complete platforming challenges and combat bosses. And some of the kids die, but that's okay because he's going to have enough that the ones that survive will carry on his genetic chain link. Right?
Yeah. I think this actually sounds like a decent mobile title. If Rare would, get off their ass and make mobile titles. Tip Top Babysitting Simulator. Like,
yeah.
Like you have to get your children, and this could be about like not just the children mentioned in Banjo-Tooie, but all the children Tip Top has had since then, because like his father, he definitely sprays the juice. The juice is loose when it comes to Tip Top, and so he just keeps fathering children. He can't help himself, and like maybe you have to get them into the water. And then the ones that survive, you have to kind of raise like a Tamagotchi situation, but like several Tamagotchis at once. It's like juggling time management. It sounds like a nightmare, honestly. I don't want to play this game. This is a bad idea.
Did you ever go to high school?
Yes, I did. I went to high school.
You probably had to take biology's class and stuff. Did you ever learn about, and I can't remember what they call it. There's a whole name for it, but there's the genes where you're like you have to breed like a flower, and then each generation you can see the genes change or whatever. You know that you learn about genetics in biology class or whatever.
I learned about it, but I forgot about it because I had to do a Donkey Kong website in high school, and so it really wasn't relevant information to my life goals.
Yeah, I'm always I'm thinking of the Simon and Garfunkel song Kodachrome, and all the crap I learned in high school. Thanks, Paul. But no, I'm thinking of like in high school. There's a whole thing about the genes, and like you like with flowers, you could see how each generation there's different traits, and how the traits would cross pollinate, and you have recessive genes and dominant genes or whatever. And I'm thinking like, what if the Tip Top game is about like trying to breed traits into the different babies? You're like, all right, well, I need to make some babies that are fireproof to get through the fire dungeon. So I need to breed. I need to go find a fire turtle for Tip Top to breed with, and then I'll make some fire babies. And I don't know, and it could be educational. You learn a little bit about genetics. There'd be spooge involved naturally. Cummies.
How would you portray the mating in this game? Would it be like Viva Pinata, where there's like this little romantic dance? It's all very...
Yeah, I was kind of torn. I was like, is it abstracted, like they're doing a dance, like Viva Pinata, or do we show in high definition the cloacal kiss? Because Tip Top the turtle does not have a penis. We all agree? He has a cloaca, the all-in-wonder hole. It's where he pisses, shits, and cummies, all from the all-in-wonder hole, the cloaca. And when one cloaca buds up next to the male cloaca buds up to the female cloaca, it just kind of spits. And there's no penetration needed. It just sort of spits. Maybe that's the tagline.
Well, I was thinking that would be a good tagline for DK Vine. We're the wonder hole for your Donkey Kong Rare and Platonic needs. We're all in one.
The Kongversation podcast, it just kind of spits.
It just kind of spits. We spit. We don't quit.
I was going to say a Tip Top game. You said we wouldn't do just another boring 3D platformer. And my brain immediately went to, like, what if Rare tried to do a Sonic-like? Like, Tip Top goes in his shell and he spins around fast, like, sliding down ramps and around loop-de-loops like a Sonic the Hedgehog, but he's a turtle in a shell. And then I was like, this idea is too serious. We need to talk more about the spitting and the babysitting.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, because I would like to say that could actually be an avenue for Tip Top during this very crowded era of Rare, where you could do maybe a take on a 2D platformer on the N64. Of course, there were some 2D platformers on the N64. Yoshi's Story, was it Mischief Makers? But it wasn't really this barn-burning genre on the N64 because everybody just wanted 3D games at the time. But what if Rare tried to do their own take on, the Sonic formula, but with Tip Top? That would give him some wiggle room. But speaking of wiggling, I think you could depict the fornication, the turtle on turtle action in Tip Top Babysitting Simulator by showing very tastefully the outer door of the Tip Top suite. And then Tip Top puts the do not disturb sign on and winks at the camera before shutting the door. And then the sun sets and then the sun rises and then the game moves on.
Yeah, and I also just Googled, do turtles have penises? And it said yes.
Oh, so...
Which is so disappointing. And apparently vaginas, too. I never know what it is, because most birds have cloacas. But as you and I know, some species of waterfowl, including ducks, do have penises and vaginas. Because, it's famously ducks have a long corkscrew-shaped penis, which helps them to force-fuck their way through... duck vaginas, which are famously labyrinthine with lots of branching paths to try and stop the unwanted mates. And apparently turtles have a penis. So this is a very educational episode here on the Kongversation podcast.
Do you remember when there was that Kongversation episode where somebody made a comment where they just said, "I do not like Jeff"?
I do. I think about it probably way more than you could imagine.
I wonder what comments we're going to get for this one.
You're not supposed to read the YouTube comments. I'll get compliments every so often, and then I'll have one comment that someone says, "I do not like Jeff."
Yeah,
and that will negate any positive thing I've experienced in a year. It's the 8 months anniversary. Also, that episode was terrible. I fucked it up, but keep your little comments to yourself. I'm fragile.
Yeah, well, I think we're learning something because, basically, you gave me misinformation where you told me the turtles had cloacas and then you took it back. So, you really, I didn't learn anything. I briefly thought I learned something, and then it turned out to be lies.
I just googled, do turtles have cloacas? And it says yes. Turtles have a cloaca. What? I don't know what is up with the Google AI. What is the story here? But I think that right at the forefront of the episode, I did tell people that what I say doesn't matter. It'll change from time to time. And
It's a blank
apparently
slate.
basic biological facts also are included. We don't know what is true, but if you are a turtleologist, if you are Dr. Cum, please let us know what is going on.
Yeah. And honestly, please consult Tip Top Babysitting Simulator. Like, get to work on it because we need this game to happen yesterday.
That's right. Well, here's another idea that was often discussed in the fandom. Because the game Dinosaur Planet was a full-fledged Diddy Kong Racing spin-off at one point.
Yes.
It eventually evolved to become a Backdoor Star Fox game. That was a much different, less common trope from a Backdoor pilot is the Backdoor Star Fox game. Do foxes have a penis? I don't know. If they're going to do ass play, they do? Okay.
I've seen enough fan art of Disney's Robin Hood.
A cartoon drawing is not a biology book. I think I might need to get back into textbooks. When's the last time you looked at a textbook? It's been a while, huh?
Yeah, since I left college, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Star Fox is a game called Star Fox Adventures that has it's Dinosaur Planet. What? Okay, let me back up because I'm getting flustered. At one point, Star Fox Adventures was going to be called Star Fox Adventures: Dinosaur Planet, right?
Yes.
And because of that, and it being based ostensibly all around one world from Diddy Kong Racing, Dino Domain, being fleshed out into a different, new, fully fleshed out world, we used to joke, what if they kept going with the Star Fox Adventures as a series, a sub-series of Star Fox, but each game would have a different subtitle, exploring a different new planet that was just another Diddy Kong Racing world being fleshed out, where the, I think somewhat facetious, humorous takes of have come around. Star Fox Adventures Walrus World is the one that we always talked about.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah. Because, basically, Star Fox Adventures: Dinosaur Planet. This was the name before it was clear that Rare was parting ways with Nintendo. And so there was this very romantic notion in there that this is the first of many Star Fox Adventures games. And they won't all have to be about Dinosaur Planet. We could visit other locations, like these centralized Star Fox games, on foot adventures. And, if you're creating this elaborate backstory for this very minor character in Diddy Kong Racing, the World 1 boss, why not do it for every boss in the game? So, the second game would be Walrus World with the origin of Bluey, who it turns out is also an extraterrestrial. Of course, this notion wasn't entirely serious, but it was still tied into our kind of fan logic of, Star Fox Adventures is just another avenue that could continually expand outward. And we can keep getting more games in this sub-series. And maybe you could have other characters from Diddy Kong Racing show up in this kind of prequel / Star Fox sequel hybrid state. Octopus Planet was another one. I think Ozzy Ben made a joke image centered around that with Bubbler, the octopus from Diddy Kong Racing. But honestly, a great character you could use in a Star Fox Adventure sequel, Wizpig. Because Wizpig is basically, or would basically be right at home in the Lilat system. We do have pig people in the Lilat system, like Wizpig. Pigma is also very similar to Wizpig in that he insults you in very cutting ways. And Wizpig calls you Little Worm. He calls the Diddy Kong Racing characters Little Worms. And I feel like other Star Fox characters also use that insult from time to time. So,
That could be the title you earn in Worm Week.
Yeah, Star Fox Adventures Worm Week. Yeah, I would buy it. But yeah, like why not like bring in Future Funland, expand that into an actual planet that's not called Future Funland because that's a garbage name for a planet, but get into the backstory of Wizpig, why he's a wizard, where that wizardry comes from, how he became this like interstellar despot, and really get into that a little bit, explore him in a way that I think the fans would like to see.
No, I find it really funny that these are the go-to examples, Walrus World and Octopus Planet, when, like, of the available options, they seem like the ones that are least conducive to building a whole game around.
Yeah.
Where, like, you said Future Funland clearly is like a sensible setting for a whole game, but I think the Dragon one, Dragon Forest, building a game around Fantasy Dragon landscape is, like, a no-brainer, whereas when you tell me Walrus World, I don't even know what to picture.
Honestly, that just makes me think, oh, they could have put Smokey the Dragon in Cameo, had things like panned out differently, had Cameo like been developed for the game, or like finished development on the GameCube. Yeah, maybe like make Cameo more intertwined a little bit than it was with the DKU, other than that clip of Banjo's voice that we hear. But yeah. Speaking of space, Jeff.
Ooh,
speaking of outer space.
Good segue. Good transition. I'm excited. You've set me up for something here.
So a little known fact, well, actually it's well known among people who still give a damn about Diddy Kong Racing, but little known in the broader gaming world, just as everything about Diddy Kong Racing is little known these days. The character of Pipsy the Mouse in Diddy Kong Racing started off as a separate concept, again, by the hands of Kev Bayless, for a potential game called Astro Mouse. Now, the design of Astro Mouse was completely different than what Pipsy became, but there is, as Kev Bayless has attested to, a clear link in the, I guess, evolutionary design of the character. And a community member who sometimes goes by the name Astro Pipsy, but is known as Zeitchris T in our Discord server, has been one of Pipsy's biggest fans in our community and has pushed the idea of Pipsy getting her own spin-off, but going back to the Astro Mouse concept where Pipsy goes into outer space. And I discussed this episode with everyone in our Discord server, the DK Vine Inner Circle, and this is what Chris had to say about Astro Mouse. I also expected that if anyone from DKR were to pop up in Banjo-Tooie, it would be her. Obviously, along with Tip Top, they always seem like they were best friends, maybe because they are the same weight class. I honestly would have bet money that a DKR character, either Pipsy or Timber, poor Timber, would have popped up in BT. I also always wonder if any of the DKR crew would have been in 12 Tales. In the back of my head, I always thought there was a chance we'd get the Astro Mouse game, with Pipsy as a guest star, or secondary playable character. For some reason, I never expected her to be a lead of a game, although that would have been better. Maybe it was the state of the industry at the time, which pretended like female gamers or people who wanted to play as women, like me, didn't exist. And yeah, like, Pipsy, she's a cute little mouse, and I think you would have to make her a little bit more marketable, especially for the late 90s. Maybe shooting her in space and having her be this, like, spacefaring, kind of like Flash Gordon type character. That could work enough. I don't know.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, to add on to that, I remembered what the thing from biology class was called. It was called Punnett squares. So I don't need people coming in the comments to tell me what it is, because now I got ahead of you. It's called Punnett squares. So anyway, if you want to learn about genes and genotypes and alleles, look up Punnett squares, or just wait for biology class.
I do not like Jeff. Sorry, I was just making a little...
No, neither do I.
Make a little notation for my various YouTube burner accounts. Just something I use later. But yeah, like, I think this idea that Pipsy might have started life as a separate character, this unexplored idea for another Rare game, of which there are so many, right? Like, I don't think Astro Mouse was ever really in the cards as an actual game they were pursuing. It was just one idea from the folder of many ideas. But I think once we learned this, it definitely kind of elevated her stock in the eyes of some fans, where it's like, oh yeah, that's something you could do with her. Like, go back to her roots. Like, again, I don't know how you would have room for another 3D platformer. So maybe in this universe, this is what Jet Force Gemini actually was. Where it's just starring Pipsy. I don't know.
Yeah, it would have been more interesting, like you say, than another 3D platformer. If we like to daydream about different genres that these Diddy Kong Racers could have been involved in, and so some sort of third-person adventure shooter type game back when those weren't really a thing. Jet Force was pretty early in the lifespan of like 3D 3D games, and so the third person shooter thing was not really big, but that's kind of, Jet Force Gemini is Rare stepping into that genre and exploring that. So yeah, it could have been interesting if it had been a spin-off instead of just having the ants in the pants cheat that does not make it DKU. Although isn't that the game that has one of the Diddy Kong Racing levels in the code or whatever? I don't know.
And
Jet Force Gemini.
The arcade, like, yeah, it's the thing about Jet Force Gemini is I can never get into it. I've tried, Jeff. No. I've tried so much to get into it, and it just falls flat with me for some reason.
I'll tell you, my issue with it is, without having any nostalgia for it, I cannot get into the control scheme. It feels outdated in a way that their 3D platformers don't, because it just feels like games of that style evolved a lot since Jet Force Gemini, and like even to me, it's hard to go back to GoldenEye 007, and that's like an all-time classic video game. But for Jet Force Gemini, it's even harder. I just can't get into the controls style of it. It's not fun for me to play, although I like the idea. There's ants, etc.
Right. Do ants have cloacas?
We're not sure. They're too small for scientists to know. It's too small.
Oh man, I hope you never teach a biology class, Jeff.
I do like the idea of teaching people stuff wrong, like as a prank.
Yeah, it's called gaslighting, Jeff, and it's something you do.
No,
well.
It's not gaslighting if they're like 12-year-olds in the classroom.
Yes, it is. You're giving them misinformation, and you're making
Kyle,
they trust you, and you're distorting their worldview.
You don't know what gaslighting is. You're misunderstanding what gaslighting is. I'm gaslighting you about gaslighting. Oh no. I'm just gonna take a break and sip on my cold can of cum while you talk about the next one.
That's I don't know why that's grosser than a hot can, but so Cameron, this is what Cameron had to say. I didn't necessarily want Crunch to get a solo spin-off game, but I did want him to feed back into the Donkey Kong series itself and become a reoccurring character. I liked entertaining the idea that K. Rool would hold him in high standing after successfully infiltrating the Kong circle of friends and helping take a rival despot off the board, with the irony being that his loyalties were wavering after hanging out with the Timbers Island crew. Afforded him the perspective that the Kongs aren't so bad, and maybe what's best for the Kremlings isn't necessarily what K. Rool wants. It's why Diddy Kong Pilot broke my heart twice, by not coming out, and then having a late-in-the-day build surface where they'd rebranded him as a generic critter. And then again when Barrel Blast perfectly aligned the stars for him to reappear, only for him to not be in the game. And yeah, this is weird to me that Crunch has just been left alone. I mean, it's weird and it's not weird because Nintendo seems allergic to using characters when they can get away with just coming up with new characters. That's what they'll do more times than not. And it sucks as a Donkey Kong fan where the majority of Donkey Kong characters were created by a studio no longer under Nintendo's umbrella. And so they'll we'll just come up with new characters. And it's like, no, I want you to use the characters you have. But Crunch is also just even Rare was kind of not going to use them by the time Diddy Kong Pilot reached its 2003 build. And it's just why not just have this be Crunch? What the hell is the holdup here? And, it might just be the Diddy Kong Racing issue of, we know who has what character, what rights belong to which company, but I don't know. It could be a legal minefield. Maybe we just don't walk down it. And the amount of times Rare has used the Diddy Kong Racing characters since the buyout, you can count on one hand. It's Diddy Kong Racing DS, which of course was a very special circumstance. And then the Rare Racers merchandise at Fangamer, in which Timber and Whizpig were the only non-Banjo and Conker characters featured. So it's just one of those things where Crunch is owned by Nintendo, but why doesn't Nintendo want to use him? Well, they just don't like using characters. But yeah, Crunch would be perfect in a game like Donkey Kong Barrel Blast. And I love the original Kremling characters created for Barrel Blast, like Kip, Cats, Calypso. They're fantastic. But Crunch would have also fit right in there.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is just the opportunities to use Crunch have been few, because how many Donkey Kong games have there been that featured the Kremlings and had a reason to feature unique individual characters other than drones that are, not drones? Yeah. Barrel Blast might be the only game where it made sense to have Crunch, and then they didn't do it because you don't usually need a named Kremling other than King K. Rool as the boss. You don't need a named character Kremling. And then the retro games didn't use the Kremlings at all. But yeah, so it's too bad. But the few named Kremlings that exist, characters like Kip, Cask, Calypso, Kludge, but also K. Lumsy is a individual character. The named Kremlings that are not drones that exist are so few and far between, and Crunch is the one that is the most applicable. You could easily just slip him into anything. He's universal, but no, they haven't had a reason to other than Barrel Blast, and they just didn't. So
he's also, I think, everybody's least favorite Diddy Kong Racing character to play as. So I don't know. Maybe they're just nobody will care about Crunch because nobody likes playing as Crunch. I like Crunch. I mean, I don't like playing as Crunch, but I like Crunch. I would love to see him somewhere. But then again, I mean, get in line, Crunch. There's so many Donkey Kong characters I want to see again. When we're struggling to get Ingard the Swordfish in a game, you're in dire straits then.
Well, don't forget, we also have here Jem Gibbon also proposed what to do with Crunch.
Yes. Would you like to read Gibbon's suggestion?
So Gibbon had said, I did want a Crunch solo game, and envisioned a 3D platformer where he was facing off against a rival band of pirates who attacked the Kremlings out at sea, each world being a huge pirate ship with different aesthetics and fake biomes on it. that idea right there is really even just like a separate idea from the character crunch, but just the world setting idea is very interesting to me. It kind of reminds me of, I'll use the example, Luigi's Mansion 3.
Okay.
Is like, was at E3 2019 when we went and all the guys were dressed up as the bellhops. But it's like, you think a game about a haunted mansion, how much variety can you inject into it? And they did a good job of like, I think it's a haunted hotel and every floor has like a different theme to it, themed rooms. So they have like an Egyptian space and they have like a pirate ship space. And they're all like haunted. Obviously Grabbed by the Ghoulies sticks more closely to being just a haunted house aesthetic most of the time, but they still find little rooms to slip in some different biome like tropes, so to speak, like the I don't know, the greenhouse or whatever. The ancient Egyptian mummies are like in the stock room in the basement or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, the idea of different pirate ships that are like, each pirate ship is just this massive traveling world with its own biome on it that's like pirate ship, but also different aesthetic mixed with it. Kind of like how Super Mario Sunshine is a game that's all about a tropical island resort, but they still find ways to inject different little biomes in it that fit the setting.
See, when Gibbons said like each world is a different pirate ship with like fake biomes, my brain immediately went to Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, which...
Oh, I don't know if that's what she meant, but yeah.
No, I mean, but that's where my brain went, because I was thinking, like, very, like, artificial environments. Like, there's so much to like about Nuts and Bolts, but what really keeps me from getting into it in the same way I get into other Banjo-Kazooie games, despite the fact that it's a completely different genre, is that the worlds. Rare is so known for creating lush environments, like realistic depictions of nature in what's otherwise a very cartoony world. But Nuts and Bolts, like, put all of the worlds in these artificial, like, warehouse settings and, you know, built them up from there with the Banjo-Kazooie cast, like, playing parts. Like, oh, we're gonna be, like, an astronaut and, you know, I'm gonna be this, like, I think, like, Jolly Roger was, like, C-3PO, talking about C-3PO. Like, it's just, like, what is this? Like, this is not good. And, yeah, like, I get what Gibbon was going for, and, like, it's a little bit better. But my brain immediately, like, recoiled at, like, fake biomes, because I was just imagining the sterility of Nuts and Bolts.
Well, yeah, speaking of sterility and Nuts and Bolts, I think when Nuts and Bolts was coming out, the video game Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, there was a lot of talk and speculation and just discussion at the time among the fandom of how this must have been a different game that they slapped Banjo onto. They like had an idea and they grafted Banjo into it, which is not true. We now know, like, you know, in great detail that it started out right from the outset as, how do we make a third Banjo-Kazooie game? What can we do that's new and evolves the gameplay of a Banjo game? And it started from the get-go as a Banjo-Kazooie game where they just thought, well, we can make such massive worlds now. And Banjo-Tooie had such massive worlds with a lot of empty space to walk to. So what if we added vehicles so you drive from place to place, and then what if you could customize the vehicle with different abilities, and that becomes, instead of this massive mapped set of buttons of all of the different types of button combinations are different abilities that Banjo and Kazooie have, which they kind of had reached the limit of in Tooie. They had found a use for every button. They were like, well, what if you mapped all the different abilities to parts that you attach to your car, your vehicle that you're building, and maybe, you know, the ability of flight is just some wings that you put on and turn it into an airplane, and then you can customize it and you use that to approach different Banjo-Kazooie style jiggy challenges. That was how the game came about. But because it's so different from the 3D platformers on the N64, we speculated, oh, this should have starred somebody else. This should have been not a Banjo game because it's too different. Or maybe it started out as something else and they slapped Banjo on it, which is not what happened. But I always said, even all the way back then, it should have been Bumper who got the starring role in this game for, and then the game would have been called Bumper's Nuts and Bolts.
Or Bumper Nuts and Bolts is what happened that led to his arrest.
Bumper : Nuts and Bolts, because we got to get a colon in there. a clean one, but
yeah, he nutted and then he bolted when the authorities showed up.
It's a very clever pun.
It is.
And also, Bumper is the character in the racing cast who, to me, is the most vehicular based in his conception, because the word bumper is a car part,
right?
And he wears the goggles,
right,
and the driving gloves.
It's actually baked into his character in a way that it isn't other Diddy Kong Racing characters. Timber is just basically Diddy Kong, but if he was a tiger and, failed to become a video game hero. Pipsy is a mouse, Crunch is a Kremling, Banjo and Conker. I don't need to get into that, but Bumper, his thing is he is a racer. He drives cars. Guy. Planes and hovercrafts. Drumstick is the best racer on the island, but he's still just a chicken in denim overalls. Bumper is about racing. And so, putting him in a spinoff that isn't just a racing game, how would you do that? Well, it turns out Nuts and Bolts would be the perfect avenue for him. Of course, Bumper : Nuts and Bolts, or Bumper's Nuts and Bolts, not as marketable as Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, because Banjo-Kazooie is a certified brand, and Bumper, again, even in 2008, who cares about Bumper? I do. A lot of people listening to this do, but let's be realistic here. Nobody gives a damn about Bumper. Now,
it would be launching a new IP with no real brand recognition, which, is obviously always riskier than launching a sequel to an established IP.
Then again, not tying it to Banjo-Kazooie would have probably made people more open and receptive to it than making a third Banjo-Kazooie console game that's so wildly different than the first two that it creates internal conflict within the fandom. Bumper's Nuts and Bolts would have been received as its own thing right from the outset. And sure, it might have struggled a bit to find its audience, but so did Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, let's be honest. So,
yeah. Well, and I speculated, if you were to give Bumper a supporting cast of his own IP world, instead of picking and choosing to revive different characters from Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie and give them new roles and new designs, like Mumbo the mechanic. Instead, a new cast. And so I was like, oh, well, Bumper the Badger, what are his friends called? Well, obviously he's got Fender the Ferret. She is the one who makes the blueprints. And then you've got Muffler the Mongoose. He's the one who runs the mechanic shop. Milky the Moose is in there because he's the one who milks the cars, as you have to do every 3,000 miles. Although I like to push it. I wait till 4,500 miles because I am a bad car owner.
Yeah, no, it's like my car is currently in the shop because something about transmission fluid. I'm like, wait, you have to change your transmission fluid? Since when?
You have to milk the car.
Yeah. Oops, oopsie doodles.
Yeah, going down to Milky the Moose's car milking emporium, and he's got a big old grin on his face. He wearing his trademark aviator sunglasses, as he always wears, and that shirt that doesn't have any fabric covering the nipples, like the hole in the shirt with the nipples out. That's how he looks. That's what we all know. He looks like that.
Could you imagine the timeline where Rare releases this game and it's a massive success, and because of that, they never go down the road of the Kinect sports games, and then like having a massive restructuring at the studio, and they never make Sea of Thieves. And what would that timeline be like?
The online discourse would be just like frustrating because you'd have so many young kids every single E3 begging for Bumper Nuts and Bolts 3. They're like, I grew up on Bumper Nuts and Bolts 3, but it's been 12 years since Bumper Nuts and Bolts 2. And every E3, they're like, oh, I think this is the year. There's a rumor that they're going to reveal Bumper Nuts and Bolts 3. And every year they get pissed off when it doesn't come true, even though they got themselves excited for no reason.
Yeah. And the cosplay, Milky the Moose, just...
Yeah, it would become a meme that people dress up like Milky the Moose at trade shows, and it becomes kind of insufferable. And the porn, oh
yeah. I mean, that would be a benefit, but
I think we wouldn't be in podcasting. We would be doing DeviantArt commissions because that's where the money's at.
In the live stream, Porygon Q says, I hope Montgomery Lightning McQueen gets to appear in the Drumsticks epic racing adventure game for the Xbox Series SX family of systems. Yeah, I don't know why. Just the idea of putting Drumstick in a racing game doesn't excite me. Like, because if we had I don't know what I want at this point, Jeff. As far as a Diddy Kong Racing spin-off, because I'm past the point where I expect anything to be done with a property. The Kongversation, our very first episode way back in 2013, was based around speculation on, there were rumors at the time of a Diddy Kong Racing revival for the Wii U. And of course, that was a load of nonsense, but we followed the story. And, in the 11 years since then, it has been beaten out of me, this childlike zeal I have for Diddy Kong Racing. At this point, I've given up hope of anything ever being done with it. So, yeah, put Drumstick in a racing game. I don't know. I don't care. I really don't care at this point. My world has gone gray.
Well, on that note, we have a couple of listener calls to take from the DK Vine hotline.
We do. I hope they cheer me up.
If you want to call, they might. Usually, I'm the one who's like gets all angsty when it comes time to listen to the calls. But I have to pick up the bill here because I'm losing you.
I just got depressed. I'm sad.
Oh yeah, it'll get better. It's June. The sun's out. There's going to be video games next week. It's officially video game week. You and I discussed how we're going to brand our E3 coverage now that E3 is not a thing.
Yeah.
And I was really pushing the branding official video game week, and that didn't get a lot of traction among the staff. So
because it's not just a week anymore. We
but that's part of the joke. That's like it's a joke in and of itself that it lasts like a month.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, if you want to leave a call to the DK Vine hotline, you can do that. You call the number. The number is 1-202-630-VINE. That Vine is 8463. I'll say it again. 1-202-630-VINE 8463. And you can call and you can leave a message. But exercise a little brevity. You get, how long do you get for a call? Is it 90 seconds?
It's 3 minutes.
3 minutes, and then you still get people who are like, "Hey, sorry, my 3 minutes ran up, but I have more to say. So let me just make this last 3 calls. We cannot play your voice for 9 minutes. We're gonna start putting our foot down. We used to be flamingos about this, but it's time to put the foot down. And Think about what you're going to ask and then ask it. You have 3 minutes. That's it.
I think they learned from us, though, given that brevity is not our strong suit.
Yeah, but do as I say, not what I do, monkey style. But let's go to the first call. We have 3 calls today. We're going to go through 3 of them. We're going to listen to them. You're going to listen to them also. And then we're going to answer them.
Jeff, I have to ask before we take this first call. Do flamingos have cloacas?
Well, I'm going to do something for you that I only do for my closest friends. I'm going to Google that cloaca question.
I feel like Google is leading you astray.
Okay, Google right here. First result. Do flamingos have cloacas? It says, like most birds, flamingos don't have penises. Male and female. That's a great sentence. That should be the tagline. Or maybe the July t-shirt. Male and female flamingos both have cloacas, which are openings used for both excretion and reproduction. I didn't mention when I said that they piss and shit and come all from the same hole. They also lay the eggs from that hole. If you think about it, that's obvious, but I wanted to put it in your head. Think about that egg plooping out. That's the same place where the shit and the cum happened.
I really hope they wash it.
Oh, you gotta keep, you gotta douche. You gotta keep it washed up in there if you're gonna do any backdoor egg dropping. But let's take the first call.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, but we gotta take our first call. I could talk about this for hours with you, Jeff, but we gotta take the first
That'll
call.
be our Oops All Tangents coming later this season.
And shitting and laying eggs.
Hey guys, it's Angry Ancestor. Today's a very special day because this marks my 10th call. Wait, no. Sorry, hold on. It's 10 seasons in a row that I've called into the Kongversation. I don't know who else can say that. Probably some other weirdo, but I can say it, that's for sure. And it's a special day because it's also your birthday, Hyle. So what are the chances? It's just fate, right? I think it's also Jeff's birthday too, right? So happy birthday, Jeff, I guess. And I think it's my birthday too, actually, which is crazy. So we're talking about racers, rare racers or something. I don't know. I didn't read it. I was just wondering, the most obvious choice to put in one of these games is Dilberta from off of Banjo-Kazooie, right? So I was wondering what would be Dilberta's dialogue, like her idle animations, what kind of outfit would she be wearing, what kind of power-ups would she have. You guys have probably already talked about it in the episode, but I just want to get your 2 cents on Dilberta. And just as like an optional question, if you have time, I know you guys are busy, but if you had to include a character from outside of Donkey Kong / Banjo-Kazooie / Conker, who would it be? Maybe the Jetpack guy, or like Baron Von Ghoul, or Fudge Hog, some rare character that's not really core to the DKU, if that makes sense. Anyways, let's have a great birthday, fellas. What do you say? Cheers to another 10 years of this bullshit.
All right. Angry Ancestor, I'm so confused right now. Because, one, it's not my birthday. You're lying to me. You're like gaslighting me like Jeff likes to do. Jeff, is it your birthday?
Not till tomorrow. First off, I'm going to say happy birthday to everyone in the world.
Yes.
Whenever you celebrate.
Because it probably is somebody's birthday right now. And so happy birthday. This is for you. Like Taj handing the balloon down. This episode is for you. I'm
gonna take a risky, just a stab at it. Just a random. All right, ready? Happy birthday, Gary. Thanks for listening to the show.
Yeah. Number one fan,
true,
Gary.
There's a chance. There is a
chance. Fingers crossed.
By the way, it's not gaslighting. I don't know if you've heard of the concept in improv that's yes and. You're supposed to roll with the birthday thing. But
when you don't know that the other person is engaging in improv, then it is just lies. Then it is just creating a web of deceit. But anyway, that's beside the point.
I have the same birthday as Steve Gutenberg.
I don't even know when your birthday is, Jeff, because you say your birthday is so many days, and I've honestly lost track. So
it's a trick, so I could get a little extra present.
You just want cake. You just want that little cake in the break room every single week. Also, Angry Ancestor, I don't know what you're talking about as far as this call goes. Because the episode topic is Diddy Kong Racing spin-offs we wanted. I think you're talking about Diddy Kong Racing sequels at this point, right? Because you're talking about putting Dilberta in there. Dilberta is not a Diddy Kong Racing character. Dilberta is a Banjo-Tooie character. That would be a Banjo-Kazooie spin-off if Dilberta got in anything. So am I wrong there? Am I
You're not wrong.
This call? Okay.
You're not wrong, but I'll tell you in the Dilberta game, the way that it works is that Dilberta can bounce on one of those exercise balls that you could use. You know, people who sit at their desk and instead of a chair, they sit on an exercise ball.
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to, I don't know, make sure that they don't poop themselves or something. And yeah, so Dilberta just bounces around on an exercise ball. And that, in terms of like animations or like voice clips, the sort of the catchphrase is, and it happens way too often because you hear the same voice clips repeated and it gets annoying. But she always says, "Say what?" Like if she takes a hit from an enemy, she's like, "Say what?"
This seems like a PS1 game. I don't know why. I'm just picturing like they're really going overboard because they can have a lot of like audio, voice clips and whatever, and so they're just overdoing it, and it just
CD-ROM technology is the future, Hyle. You need to get on board with CD-ROM technology. Yeah. I remember when Hyle first bought a Nintendo game that came on a disc, his very first GameCube, and he looked at that and he said, "Say what?" Because he's used to a big old chonky cartridge. Plug it in. Yeah.
I was. It was too flat, and I could stick my finger in the hole, and I didn't like it.
How can you fit any megabytes on this?
No, like for me, the chonkier the cartridge was, the more powerful the game.
Yeah, which is why we liked the Game Genie, because you could have two cartridges chonked onto one. Your thing was just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I like them big. So, Angry Ancestor, because it is your birthday, and because this is part of your streak of Kongversation call-ins per season, I don't want to dismiss your call willy-nilly. So I will say that to answer your second question, or hypothetical about if we could put another rare character, I guess in this Diddy Kong Racing sequel, or I don't know, but that's not really like born of the DKU, but exist maybe parallel to the DKU, it in Rare's otherwise existing library. I don't know. I guess Rash the Battletoad.
Rash the Battletoad comes to mind, and then and why single out Rash is because he's the one who wears the sunglasses.
He's the sunglasses
Obviously.
One, yeah, and he also had all of the cameos in all of those games in the 2010s. Right.
Even though Zitz is the leader of the Battletoads.
Nobody cares about Zitz.
People who don't know Battletoads lore don't know that Zitz is the leader of the Battletoads. Yeah. Rash is just the one with the sunglasses.
Yeah.
But the other one that comes to mind for me, this might be a little outside the ballpark, but I'm picturing like if they took Saber Wolf, not Saber Man, but Saber Wolf, but like just slightly anthracized him a little bit, make him able to drive a car. And because, you know, they did Saber Wolf as a fighter in Killer Instinct, and that's canonically a different character. Yeah. A werewolf man. But the idea of the cartoon version of Saber Wolf as seen in Saber Wolf GBA, I could very much picture that character sitting in a car, driving a car as a cartoon man.
It's funny because I'm thinking back in the second iteration of the Fast and the Furious, where it was a kart racer, Saberman was in that one, but Saber Wolf was the Killer Instinct Saber Wolf, and it was just like, well, that's weird. They're mashing up those characters together. I always took it to be that Saber Wolf, the Killer Instinct character, had that nickname, the colloquial nickname, not the cloaca nickname. Do Saber Wolves have cloacas? Well, I'll Google that, but I took it to be like Saber Wolf is named after the Saber Wolf of mythology, which is the Saber Wolf from Saber Wolf.
Well, I think I could be getting my lore mixed up, and especially because they've like rebooted the lore and stuff. But like isn't Saberwolf from a family of like Van Helsing style monster hunters? The Von Saberwolves, and then like he himself gets lycanthropy and becomes a wolfman. I don't know if that's true. Don't quote me on Killer Instinct lore.
Yeah, because they did tweak things for Killer Instinct 2013. So I can't. I know he's of nobility. In one of the backstories, but yeah, he gets lycanthropy and becomes a werewolf, or maybe he like experiments on himself, or I don't know. Again, it's all. I need to bone up on my Killer Instinct Spinal.
No, that's Spinal. Yeah. Let's take our second call.
Hi there. So it's very auspicious that you asked this question, because earlier this month, it's still May when I'm talking to you, I had come up with an idea for a character list for Diddy Kong Racing. One of the things about the original Diddy Kong Racing was that a couple of the characters, 3 I guess technically, went on to have their own series. So one way to do it is to have characters that are in a series in this. So here's the character list. For new let's do returning characters. Diddy Kong, the protege of Donkey Kong. Diddy is a grease monkey at Congo Motors when he's not adventuring. Dixie Kong, Diddy's girlfriend. She refused to be left out of another big adventure, so she's come along. Tiny Kong, Dixie's younger but taller sister. She wants to be a model, but is an accounting prodigy and holds a job as a CPA and tax assessor. Crunch the Kremlin recently began hanging out with Diddy Kong after his boss disappeared. Decided to tag along when he hears about Timber. Banjo Bear, an old friend of Diddy who's a pacifist and tries to live a quiet life. His heterosexual life partner, Kazooie, refuses to participate, but also didn't want to be left at home, so she'll squawk and swear at the other drivers. Conker the Squirrel, the king of the Panther Kingdom. He's had a very sad life and came because his sponsor thought it would be a really good thing for his mental health. Timber the Tiger, Diddy's childhood best friend and the prince of Timber Island. He's been racing cars since he was a cub and can't seem to catch a break luck-wise. Pipsy the Mouse. Pipsy was a very timid mouse, but recently came back from an adventure in space. Bumper the Badger was recently released from prison after and saving the world from space as part of his unity service. Tip Tup Jr., the only boy and youngest of 21. His father used to live on Timber Island before getting married. Drumstick the Rooster, the champion of Timber Island. Drumstick has been touring the world trying different kinds of races for a while. TT the Stopwatch, the guardian of the time trials. TT is very proud of all of his top times in every circuit. See if you can beat them. Hodge the Genie, the Once Guardian, to awaken once more the presence of evil. Whizpig the Tyrant, the evil conqueror from outer space. He recently conquered all of the Lilac system and is for revenge. Brings us to the plot. Whizpig was lost in space and arrived in the Lilac system and managed, through power, luck, or magic, to take it over. Which brings us to the new characters. Marcus McCloud, the son of a famous pilot. Marcus is a member of the same mercenary group his grandfather founded. Skippy Toad, the son of a famous mechanic. Skippy is a pilot for Team Star Fox. Yvonne Hare, the daughter of the commander of the Lilac system, and her mom calls her Pudding. Beppy the Crow, a diesel mechanic at OK Motors. Beppe had always wanted to be a race car driver, and now he can. Dribble the Dog, a cabbie from Diamond Taxi. Dribble is the time to... Tanner, we got to...
Unfortunately, the call just kind of breaks up. The quality of the call deteriorates at this point, and nothing else is audible. I was really enjoying the lore, especially with it being clear that the Star Fox series is a prequel to Diddy Kong Racing. Bravo there. I'm so sorry. Sometimes call quality can just absolutely drop, and we don't have an audible recording. Again, suggesting a Diddy Kong Racing sequel and not a spinoff. I don't know if I was clear enough when I discussed or announced this episode on social media, Jeff.
Yeah, they want another Diddy Kong Racing game. I get that.
And maybe that is key. Maybe that's why everybody keeps getting hung up on, well, first we need another Diddy Kong Racing, because the truth is, we're talking about Diddy Kong Racing spin-offs we wanted, but never got. And I think a lot of people are thinking, well, we have to reestablish Diddy Kong Racing first, and then maybe we can get Diddy Kong Racing spin-offs we want and can potentially have. People aren't ready to give up the notion yet, whereas I was just walking into these calls defeated, sullen, based upon my misbegotten youth turning out to be lies. Lies like you tell me, Jeff. And other people are more optimistic, like, you know what? Let's do a new Diddy Kong Racing.
I learned it from the Fleetwood Mac song.
So, yeah, I mean, I love hearing people's Diddy Kong Racing sequels idea, and this was very fleshed out and thought out. And I'm sorry the call kind of broke up at the end, so I didn't get to hear your final thoughts there to wrap it up. But, you know, honestly, I think a Diddy Kong Racing sequel, even though I have also given up hope for it ever happening, we're at a stage in the long winding relationship between Nintendo and Rare / Microsoft, where we could potentially have a Diddy Kong Racing follow-up where, you know, I'm sure some deal could be struck where, look, nobody's using Timber, nobody's using Pipsy, nobody's using any of these characters. So what would it hurt if, you know, they were licensed for a Nintendo game? Do I think it's likely? Hell no. But it's probably more likely than it was 11 years ago when we first started seriously entertaining this idea. So, you know, I understand the enthusiasm for the idea. And this has kind of taken different forms as the decades have rolled on, because, you know, we go from the Nintendo Rare partnership where we just want a Diddy Kong Racing sequel. And we saw with Donkey Kong Racing, you know, Taj was going to be in that one, even though it was primarily the Donkey Kong cast. And after the buyout, then we were like, oh, well, maybe we can get a Diddy Kong Racing game sans Diddy and Crunch. And it could be branded as something else. And now we've got the Rare Racers branding for legacy Diddy Kong Racing stuff that's owned by Rare. So that was kind of like where our hopes and dreams were. And then after Nuts and Bolts and Rare kind of had their, we'll call it low period, then the hope was, well, maybe Nintendo can revive the Diddy Kong Racing brand, which they do own, and have it be Diddy, but with an entirely new cast around him. And then we kind of got away from that idea. So it's just interesting how our desires and, I guess, daydreaming about what a sequel could look like have taken different forms despite the circumstances changing. And yet it's never completely snuffed out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, you know, again, I think people were approaching this from the wrong view, like idea, because we're not really, this episode is not about a racing game. This episode is about all of the new different spin-off genres starring original characters like the game Banjo-Kazooie. This game is more about Banjo-Kazooie than it is about Diddy Kong Racing. So, I don't want to say any more thoughts about a racing game. That's not what this is about. We've done a lot of episodes about Diddy Kong Racing, the game. This episode is about new games that could come with these characters. So
that's right.
But thank you for that call.
Thank you.
And all of the thought that you put into that. We have one more call.
Your passion is appreciated, but we've got one more call. And if this is about a racing game, I'm going to throw up my hands and just walk away.
Throw up my lunch.
All right.
I'm going to puke on my keyboard.
Hey guys, Rick here. So when I heard about the topic for this conversation, I pulled up the roster for DKR and I was just looking through everyone and was like, all right, can I come up with anything like unique for any of these characters? And I wasn't really getting anything until I landed on Pipsy. And I think Pipsy could star in her own stealth game, you know, a la the Metal Gear series. Though she probably wouldn't be doing any kind of CQC combat like Snake does. I'm thinking purely stealth or sneaking around like rats do, you know. Yeah, I don't know. Like, one of my favorite films is The Secret of Nim. I love that film. And I love how the rats, they have like this whole community, this whole world just like underneath the rose garden. So I just imagine like these giant like labyrinth mazes, and Pipsy can be sneaking in for whatever reason, getting cheese, or maybe not so stereotypical. Learn more about Pipsy, who she is. She got any relatives? She have a special someone? How'd she meet everybody? Maybe cameos from other rare characters. I don't know. But yeah, that's what I'd like to see personally. Can't wait to hear what everyone else came up with. And you guys have a great week.
Well, thank you for the call, Rick. Well, okay. Here we go. Pipsy, but it's like Metal Gear.
I like this. So, as soon as they started talking, Pipsy, they said a game starring Pipsy, and for some reason my brain immediately went to, oh, a stealth, like, detective game. That my brain said, and then they used the word stealth, and I was like, oh, okay. My brain was going more the detective, because I was picturing Pipsy in one of those Sherlock Holmes hats. Detective Pipsy. Like Detective Pikachu or whatever. But yeah, like...
Would have been a Mario Kart Tour variant if the Diddy Kong Racing cast was in Mario Kart Tour.
Right. Like Drumstick with the big sausage. But, yeah, I also will say...
Drumstick with the big cloaca.
Oh, no. After, like, Drumstick laid a really big egg, and everything didn't just... It didn't quite tighten back up the same again.
Oh,
you know?
Oh, Jeff. I don't like Jeff.
You said big cloaca. What am I supposed to take with that? But I'll tell you this. The Secret of Nim is a good movie. That's true. And what I will say about that is that obviously it was based on the book Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. But you might remember when you watched the animated film that the mouse in the film is not named Mrs. Frisbee. She's named Mrs. Brisby. And that is because during production, they were concerned about the Frisbee trademark of the Frisbee toy, which is, of course, the trademark is owned by Whammo, Whammo being the manufacturers of Frisbee flying discs. And so, if you watch the movie now, you'll never be able to think of it the same again. Whammo told them they cannot call her Frisbee. So,
oh, what the hell is George Michael's problem? I don't understand why he would come after them.
Yeah, Arrested Development season 5 got weird, but yeah, I think that is probably one of the more interesting genres that we haven't discussed. The idea of a stealth game with a cartoon character stealth game is something we don't see a lot of, because stealth games are often war themed and gun themed, but like a cartoon stealth game, like the stealth missions in general are fun because sneaking around, trying to solve, like, how am I going to get around, and I have to get to the cabinet to get the documents, and then I have to get back and unlock the door and not get caught by the guards, and they've got their little flashlights. But what's really fun about them too is that they often employ a lot of gadgets. And I think that in a cartoon world where you can get a little fantastical, you could go overboard with interesting, funny little gadgets. And that'd be a cool niche for Pipsy to just be like a totally new, different feeling game in Rare's catalog.
Yeah, to like flesh it out a little bit more in my mind, I'm picturing that Pipsy, like the high point of her life was when she was a kid. And, you know, an extraterrestrial pig invaded her island, and she went on this, like, racing adventure across the island and into space. And then her life peaked after that. Like, nothing can match the adrenaline from that, like, week of her life. And so she's, like, a burned out adult, just hating existence, and she vicariously gets a thrill when she decides to shoplift. at the store. Like just a small thing she puts in her pocket, right? And I know Pipsy doesn't have pockets, but adult Pipsy, she's got pockets. And she feels alive again. And so she just continually escalates, ups the ante until she's like robbing banks and pulling off these grand heists. And that could be a fun game.
We have this character, the impetus for the plot, shows up and is like, "Hey, I've got a job. I've got a big hit, one big hit." And she's like, you know, reluctant, but then they decide to go on the job. And he's sort of that point man who's like, you know, in the heist movie, he's like, I'm the guy with the plan. So you're gonna come in here and you're gonna have to do this. He's like the guy in the headset, the guy in the chair, kind of guy. And obviously, it would be Milky the Moose. So Milky the Moose is the guy in the chair, and he's like the one who sets him up with the gadget, sets her up with all her gadgets, like in a James Bond movie or book. Yeah,
because people should read more. That's your thesis for this episode.
Yeah, the original book, he was not called James Bond. He was called James Brondo. And they had to... Is that a brand name? What is Brondo? That word just popped into my head.
Is that from Idiocracy?
Oh, wait, yeah, that was...
Yeah.
What am I... I'm trying to think of something else. There's like an actual kitchen, like, cleaning supply or something that rhymes, but sounds like that.
Jeff...
This is bad podcasting.
Jeff, I don't have a kitchen, and if I did, I wouldn't clean it. So, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, you probably... You know... you don't need a kitchen if you have a microwave.
Are you thinking of Brawny paper towels?
Fridge. No, but Brawny is a brand name.
Yeah.
So that could have worked with my joke. Doesn't really sound like Bond. But
no, it doesn't. Not a good joke. Well, but we're
workshopping this live. You know, 13 years of this podcast, 12, 11 years of this podcast, and you'd think that we would have it down sort of a natural instinct for podcasting, and I just never tried to get good at it.
But it keeps you authentic. It keeps it raw and real. It can't be polished, because then you smooth off what makes it interesting.
We're showing you guys the parts that the other podcasts don't want you to hear. They edit it out, which is kind of like lying, and I'm against lying.
What we do is we cut out the holes in the costume and let the bad parts stick out, like Milky the Moose.
Thank God that was your joke. I thought you say cut. we're gonna bring foreskin into this, which is just another avenue that is one key too far. Once with the different topics, my glass of cum or whatever.
It's too complicated. It's too complicated. Foreskin and what have you. That's why I like the cloaca. It keeps things simple. Keeps things universal.
I can think of 3 skins at a time, max.
So, to wrap all of this up, Jeff, I want to reiterate, because I know people might be listening and they're thinking, you shithead, you idiot, you're living in the past, dumbass. People don't give a damn about Diddy Kong Racing these days. And I know, like, we're a dying breed. We are. I'm not deluded. I'm not sitting here thinking, well, gee, maybe we could get that Bluey the Walrus game. Finally. Like, it's a goddamn struggle to get Banjo-Kazooie games made in the modern day. It's been 10 years since we've had a Donkey Kong game, Jeff. Even Diddy Kong Racing itself, the original game, has not been legally attainable for 23 years. Everything sucks, but I say that. But I look at what Rare is doing nowadays. Sea of Thieves. Sea of Thieves seems to be the template that Rare is following, at least for the time being, because Sea of Thieves is still a game very much rooted in the world of Rare. It's just not hanging itself on a particular character. And before that, there was the Royston method. Like, after the buyout, what Rare would start doing is they would continue to expand their world, but rather than take a notable character from, say, Diddy Kong Racing, they would just stick this very minor element, like Royston the Goldfish, in the background of a new IP. And then they could do whatever they wanted and still kind of bring it into the fold. Grab by the Ghoulies and Viva Pinata are the most notable examples of this. And, that worked just as well. It's not as sexy. It's not as, I think, it's not as based in what fans would have wanted when Diddy Kong Racing was announced and came out and had all this fanfare, and we knew Banjo and Conker were both getting games in the year or years to come, and it created this like frenzy of speculation. Just then taking, say, Banjo's Goldfish and sticking them in the background of a haunted house, it doesn't really lend itself to the daydreaming aspect of fandom. It's not like we can just sit back and be like, ooh, I wonder what kind of game they're going to stick Royston in the background of next. Nobody's sitting back thinking, like, what happens is Rare will announce a game and then you're like, oh, I wonder if Royston will be in it. And we can talk about it at TK Vine. But, it is what it is. And 9 years ago, Playtonic, they said they did want to follow the Diddy Kong Racing model, spinning off characters from Yooka-Laylee and subsequent games. But so far, 9 years later, Yooka-Laylee is the brand. And, I mean, if they were thinking, like, we're going to spin off the Knights of Camelot, then that's a bullet dodged, because I would not want a Knights of Camelot game. Yeah, fuck those guys.
Yeah, no, I'm still banking on Nimbo 64 coming, but actually, I tried to think of what's a funny character that could have their own game. So I googled up the wiki, a fandom wiki or whatever, list of all the Yooka-Laylee characters, and one of them is called Blamphibian Golf Course Owner. I thought that's a title for a game. I'd play that.
Yeah,
Blamphibian Golf Course Owner. It sounds like a sim game, like you are running and operating a golf course yeah. So anyway, Playtonic, you can have that one for free.
Yeah, Jeff won't sue.
Yeah, I don't know how. I would, but I just don't know how.
It's just the hassle. Like, you have to find legal representation, and who has the time?
Yeah, I'm one of those guys. I'll keep saying I'm gonna sue for like months and years, but then like never get around to it because it's just a hurdle, I had to make a phone call. I don't want to talk to a human on voice ever.
Yeah, which is why you're really bad at doing a podcast.
So, Hyle, what final thoughts here? Just as you said, none of this is going to happen. That's true.
No. Honestly, at this point, I'm so broken down. I'm so beaten back in my hopes and dreams for this shared universe and my personal fandom of it. I just want Diddy Kong Racing on NSO. Like, let's just get the game back into circulation so, like, the younger fans who have this misinterpretation of its nature can finally, like, understand it on the level that those who steep themselves in this world and this ideology have, and so we can all appreciate the game together. That's all I want. I just want the game on a modern system, and if that's so far from where I was back in 1997. When I had all of these wild, fanciful notions, or even like 2001, when I was imagining a second Star Fox Adventures game, but with an octopus or something stupid like that. So, just give me Diddy Kong Racing on NSO and I'll shut up for a while.
Well, I'll tell you this, Hyle. Next week, we are starting up Stinky Ape Summer. We will be following all of the news, of the video game world as the industry starts to reveal itself, as it cuts the hole in the shirt to give us a little peek. And I don't know any like insider information, but just the feeling in the air of an excitement that comes at this time of year, I'm feeling it. And when you're looking for Diddy Kong Racing to be re-released or any of these types of spin-offs and things to happen, I'll just tell you, stay tuned. I think there's still a little bit of milk left in this moose.
This has been a File 2 production.
It just kind of spins.